Today, Fox News announced that it has parted ways with Tucker Carlson. Just a few minutes later, after this announcement hit Twitter like a bombshell, CNN's Don Lemon, not to be outdone, announced that he would be leaving CNN. Here is Lemon's sort of text about it. He posted this on Twitter, and I can only assume he typed it out in notes on his iPhone and then uploaded it as an image. Does that what that looks like to you?
Yeah, it's like he typed it out in MS Word or something like that.
Yeah.
It's violet.
Right, violet and in like vertical format. It's like, okay, here's my thoughts.
I feel like this is I'm going to get out in front of this one. Let me just put this out because he said that CNN contacted his agent, that after 17 years there, they didn't even tell him himself. And so I feel like he wanted to be the one to break the news and sort of control the narrative about it. Okay. Now, some people are saying these two network anchor firings or terminations or whatever we're going to call them are related, but Don Lemon was not breaking any grounds, pushing the envelope for free speech. He was not challenging COVID. Not at all, was a COVIDist. He was not standing out for authoritarianism. He was not anti-war. Tucker Carlson, however, was all of those things, remains, it's not a postmortem, remains all of those things, anti-authoritarianism. He speaks for free speech, and he is against the military-industrial complex and has spoken at length about the corruption in Ukraine. Don Lemon hasn't done any of those things, so let's put him aside. We'll do his
I don't give a shit.
later.
I frankly don't care about Don Lemon at all. I mean, really don't care at all. 17 years, whatever. He's just like a mouthpiece of a failing CNN network. Who cares? No one's watching that channel anyway. I much more, though, do care about the only anti-war voice on all of mainstream media, which is Tucker Carlson and friend of the show. So that to me is a much bigger voice in this entire argument right now that has been silenced.
Absolutely. And I think where it stands historically is much bigger than Don Lemon's exit, because again, Don Lemon was falling in line with exactly what mainstream media demanded of him. Tucker was not. Now, he was a divisive figure on Fox for all sorts of reasons, but he was the only one willing to call out corruption and scandal. Here's a good summary from Glenn Greenwald, and with an addendum from Aaron Mate. So Glenn Greenwald originally tweeted this. Tucker was the cable host who most opposed the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine, denounced CIA, FBI, and DHS for its systemic lies and corruption, devoted himself to a pardon for Julian Assange, objected to regime change efforts in Cuba, and criticized the Trump administration's militarism. Aaron Mate adds that he also accurately covered and challenged the dirty war in Syria, including the OPCW's Duma cover-up scandal, which we talked about at length when that was uncovered, unlike everyone else on cable TV and almost all of the leftist media. Absolutely true. Those are unpopular things that most of the media has its head so far up its ass that it pretends don't exist at all. That wasn't exactly good English, but you know what I mean.
Right. So last month we had Tucker on this very show, sat down for a wide-ranging interview. And of course, it was right after the January 6th coverage and what had unfolded there. And of course, the speculation about feds at the Capitol building and all of that stuff, the Ray Epps video. But his staff, his production team, his producers got to go to the Capitol and look at all of that January 6th footage. And he said, I think the reason we were asked, we were able to do it is because we were the only ones that asked. So producers for weeks and weeks and weeks were combing through footage. Of course, the shaman, what's his name? The QAnon shaman ends up getting then released from prison as a result of that coverage, that footage, and that expose and that story. So Tucker at the time, he sat down with us. He said he thought he had a good relationship with Fox News and a secure spot there. But he says he was given free range. And if there's one thing that I know about Tucker, it's that he is vehemently opposed to censorship. And no one will tell him what to say or what to do. No one's going to come to him and tell him, hey, you can't do this story or you can't say this. He's going to give them the middle finger. That's just, I know that to be the case. I know that's how he is. And he's not going to tell you, you're not going to tell him that you can't say something. So here he was on our show talking specifically about this sort of free range chicken.
I'm saying what I really think, and I think it really, really matters. And if I get fired for it, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to change. And if I will say, I probably shouldn't admit this, but the people that I work for, whatever you think of the company that I work for, one of them, one of the top people, texted me the other day about something, very nice text, and said, I just, but for the record, I really disagree with you on Ukraine. And I wrote back and I said, I know you do, and I'm so grateful that you let me disagree with you in public. This is someone I work for, a well-known person. I was like, I'm so grateful that you let me disagree. I think that's an incredibly rare thing. Right. I don't think that's allowed in any other news organization. So whatever you think of Fox, not a perfect company, of course. You worked there for years, but they are allowing me to say things they disagree with, and I think that's wonderful.
Now that was weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, in February.
Right.
So we are probably about 5 or 6 weeks from that interview. So what changed, if anything? And
the news, what people don't understand is, or maybe they do, is that the news changes daily, right? And so if there's some sort of editorial, and we don't know, I don't want to speculate at all because I have no idea. I wasn't in any sort of editorial meetings with Tucker and his staff. No one knows but the people in those rooms what happened. And Tucker will tell me when he is not probably inundated with 1,000 text messages like he is today by friends from far and wide with all sorts of thoughts and feelings. And Glenn
one
Beck
thing about him that I think it's okay to share personally is he's really good at building a wall around himself when he feels like he needs it. And he won't get crazy in his head. Like if this news were about me, I would be furiously watching Twitter or seeing who says what or seeing what the buzz is. He knows how to just sort of tune it out and give himself what he needs.
Spooky Spoon wants to know, is Tucker joining Redacted? We would absolutely love to have Tucker join Redacted. I know that Glenn Beck reached out today and said, hey, come join the Blaze. He'll do whatever he wants to do. And if this was immediate, he was planning to do a show today and this happened this morning, I will speculate on this. There's no way in that amount of time you've got like a full like backup plan. Like you're like, you know what? Okay, I'm done today. I'm like Jerry Maguire. I'm starting my own agency and I'm going off and no.
They were actually prepping for today's show.
Yeah. We think, right? So again, no, he's going to take time. There's a wedding in the family that he's going to deal with and just enjoy his family. Like he's not one to like rush into anything like that. Also, I will say this about Tucker. He's not a navel gazer. Like he is not like a me. Like how does this really reflect on me? He doesn't give a shit what you think of him. Like he doesn't care. And it's not about him. The way that he handles himself is very much like, well, what am I going to do about my staff? His writers and those sorts of people, like what's going to happen here? And are these people going to come with me if I go somewhere else? Am I going to do something independent? And he's going to very much think about that. He left the Daily Caller a number of years ago, an organization that he founded with Neil Patel. And it's a website, a lot of writers, a lot of journalists that work for him that he would hire. And he sold his board membership, or he sold his part of the company to Neil Patel back in 2020. And so I was thinking, well, maybe he'd go back to Daily Caller or something. But anyway, it's all speculation. He's just going to figure out what he's going to do.
Well, I think, yes, we're not going to extrapolate, but we are going to sort of put this in historical context, because how does a network decide that it's worth it to get rid of its top moneymaker? Here are the ratings for March showing incontrovertibly that Tucker was their biggest star. Take a look here. Fox News, again, finishing top, averaging 1.32 million viewers a day. So put that in your head, 1.3 million viewers per day. That's the average. But then let's look at the next screen. Tucker Carlson broke the Five's 11-month streak as the most watched cable program, averaging 3.25 million. So 3 times the average viewership on Fox is what Tucker was able to pull in, remaining the top rated cable news show in March among adults 25 to 54, or as we say in the business, in the demo. Now, again, we are in a place that we find ourselves, we've been before as a nation and in the West and in this sort of media climate. This has happened before. In February of 2003, Phil Donahue had the #1 show on MSNBC and he was fired. And here is what a leaked internal memo said about that firing. They said, I highlighted this part. An internal MSNBC memo leaked to the press stated that Donahue was hurting the image of the network. He would be a difficult public face for NBC in a time of war, the memo read, and Donahue never returned to the airwaves.
So he was pro-peace, he was anti-war, and NBC's like, nope, we need him out of here.
I mean, it points out earlier in this piece that General Electric and Microsoft, MSNBC's founders and defense contractors that went on to make tremendous profits for the war, were not about to tolerate a dissenting voice. So is this something that is familiar? Is this history repeating ourselves? I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying we should watch for it. Absolutely.
Well,
the memo... let me just finish this because I think the memo is a bombshell, and then ask questions. The memo went on to say that Donahue seems to delight in presenting guests who are anti-war, anti-Bush, and skeptical of the administration's motives. He turned out to be pretty stinking right about that. The report went on to outline a possible nightmare scenario where the show becomes, quote, a home for the liberal anti-war agenda at the same time that our competitors are waving the flag at every opportunity. They could not stomach being a peaceful network. Can't have it.
No.
Cannot have it.
There's too much money in it.
Okay, go ahead, David, and then we're going to get back to this Chris Matthews.
So I just wanted to point out, too, that how competitive these networks are. They all volley for number one, and Tucker Carlson's not just number one on Fox. As far as I know, he's the number one talk show, period. Yes. So for them to get rid of that, I mean, that's more or less going to push people to other, and they didn't care that people might go to another network due to this.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know contractually what he had there, but I know that he was vehemently anti-censorship. And so if there was some sort of a pushback about a segment that was planned for Monday, today, and he was told he couldn't do said segment, he would have walked out. He would have immediately walked out. And so if that's what happened abruptly, then I can totally see it. It's in keeping with past behavior, let's say.
Now, let's circle back to this Donahue thing, because I think it's an important thing to remember that, we now find ourselves again on the eve of several wars against Russia and China, majorly, and then several wars in Africa. And in 2003, when Donahue was fired, we also were on I would say, we're calling it Iraq War Part 2, right? Now 10 years later, after MSNBC began, they had this sort of 10-year anniversary party, and MSNBC host Chris Matthews was asked about why Donahue was fired by journalist Amy Goodman for Democracy Now!, and they literally cut her microphone. Watch this.
Chris, on 10 years of MSNBC, but I wish standing with you is Phil Donahue. He shouldn't have been fired for expressing an anti-war point of view on the eve of the election. His point of view and the people he brought on were
I don't know what the reasons were, but I doubt it was that.
Well, we have the NBC memo. That was a secret memo that came out that said they didn't want him to be the face of this network, an anti-war face at a time when the other networks were waving the flag.
I think you might talk about
Phil Donahue.
Remember me when you answer.
I said there, so Phil, you were a great patriot.
Sorry, he literally says, cut her microphone. Let's cut her microphone. Let's let her talk, because she actually asked Donahue about this, and I think that it's important to let him have his say.
We did have the NBC memo, the secret memo, that said they didn't want their flagship show to be you when the other networks were waving the American flag.
That's what it said. And by the way, that memo was written by a Republican focus group, a Republican counseling group that took the focus group and that revealed that most of the people in the focus group didn't like me. But I saw that, Amy.
And yet you were the most popular show.
Well, often we led the night for nobody burned the town down on MSNBC, including me. Fox just ran away with the ratings and continues to enjoy that success.
Were you watching MSNBC that night?
I did. I saw it. And I called the kids. I said, hey, I'm not sure I did it soon enough, but I certainly was grateful for, I needed the pat on the back at the time.
So, I think this is important, because what do these two voices have in common? Well, they were willing to call out corruption, military expansion, and they were silenced when maybe their voices, these messages were most needed.
I'm going to say this. I'm surprised he lasted this long. I really am.
Yeah.
Look, when you're, I think, as what's his name? Now it's drawing a blank here. Said that you can't be a part of a network, a corporation like that, and be anti-war or be against that message for very long, because you will either something will happen, right? You'll have to break away from it, or you'll become part of the machine. Right. And Noam Chomsky, right? So you said this. You cannot possibly. I'm surprised he was there that long. I really, really am. And through all of the lawsuits and all of the stuff that they've he's had to deal with, they've had to deal with, and having to be the only voice in that building in that way, standing up for these things. I just think he's better served to be off on his own.
But all of the things that he was against, that he exposed, Fox News is pro those things, and so are their sponsors, and now so are their ownership. Take a look. In February of this year, BlackRock announced that it increased its position in Fox Corporation. More money, more ownership, more condensation of condensing of power. Could this have played a part of it? Or could it have been this, as speculated by presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., saying that Tucker was fired 5 days after he crossed the red line by acknowledging that the TV networks pushed a deadly. I'm not going to read that out loud, actually, because of you can read it yourself. But he's talking about how Tucker told the truth about Big Pharma advertising and TV being complicit. It seems like that's another power structure that was dismantled by this one voice. And it will be very quiet without that. And it leads us into a bigger discussion about the dinosaur that is broadcast television.
Right. So then we have a discussion here about independent media, right? We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're streaming live on both platforms. We have arguably every night about 1 million or so viewers that watch our show total across all of our numbers, which blows a lot of different CNN shows out of the water. Which, think about that for a second. Like, our show that Natalie and I spend 8 to 10 hours a day writing and producing and putting together, and our production team behind the scenes, we have a small group of us. I mean, there's like 5 or 6 of us on this team, really small team, right?
Yeah.
Are able to do this show. And then when you think about the budget of these major newscasts and all of each staff has like 40 people per show, and Don Lemon's show, how many people work on that show, and all the cameras and all of the millions of dollars, how much money could be saved by just focusing on the journalism and getting away from all of that. I just think Tucker's probably going to be the last of the highest paid anchor salaries. Like, I don't think that you're going to start to see, I just think that's a dying form now. Broadcast television journalism. Like, are we going to see another like Tucker Carlson come along on MSNBC or Fox someday? Like, what's there now? That demographic is, aging out. Are people going to buy a cable subscription? How many of you pay for a cable subscription so that you can flip on and watch these things? I mean, really, I don't know how many people do. I don't know how many young people do you know are getting, like, they're in their 20s and 30s, they're getting their first house or their apartments or whatever. They're calling up the cable company to get a cable box.
Yeah.
Who's doing that?
It's funny because, like, my daughter is 16 years old, and I don't know that she's ever watched regular television. Just like the cable news networks, because I've never had it. I mean, in her entire life, like I stopped watching all that stuff like back in the early 2000s. So it's like she's just never been exposed to it.
I don't think my kids know how to use it. Like, when we go into a hotel or something, I'm like, oh, see what's on the menu. They don't even understand.
They don't even know, like, that TV that's there. They're like, no, I'm just going to look at, they brought an iPad on the trip or something like that. They'd rather sit there and do that than flip on this anachronistic device and flip through CNN or whatever hell they have on in the hotels. And that's the other thing about these cable channels. It's artificially inflated, right? Because they're pushing these cable subscriptions on you as part of a bundle for internet. They're also, when you go to the airport or whatever, they've got all these cable boxes on in the airport. And that's the only reason people are ever watching CNN in the first place, is when you're on it's on at the airport.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if it's like, so I watched a movie called Bombshell with Charlize Theron, and It was about Fox News and Roger Ailes.
Oh, yeah.
And the most important thing to these top people, to give these people even the opportunity to be on TV, is loyalty. We want you to be loyal. We'll give you lots of money, but you're going to do exactly what we tell you. If you get out of line, you lose your contract, and you lose $30 million a year, whatever the contracts are that these people get. They're insane contracts. So they have a lot over their head when they even get into the part where you're seeing them by themselves on a news show. They've already been through that conversation.
Yeah. Which is why it was so interesting that, I think liberals are sort of celebrating that Tucker was off the leash for too long. And now we won't have to hear him, step out of line when it comes to COVIDism or what have you, race, all of those kinds of things. And, I find it so interesting because, I had sort of shared something on Twitter, like it's sad that one large and loud anti-war voice has been silenced. And someone else was like, yes, but he was odious in other ways, so I throw that out. And I was like, okay, but you can't take somebody as a whole. You can think, I don't like these things that they have to say. But if you're celebrating an anti-war voice that's been silenced, that's not good for any of us. And so you have to think about how this is going to reverberate on everyone when there is a whole contingency of media consumers that just won't hear this anymore.
Hey, you let us a super chat. Thank you, Hey You, for your $10 super chat. Says this could be a win for Tucker. The only audience loss will be the boomers with cable and not by being associated with Fox. He may be able to win over some younger viewers, though, through a different medium. I agree, because like you go to Florida, you go to these other places where you got a lot of the boomer generation. They just have Fox News on all day in their house. It's just on. The TV is just on nonstop, morning until night, and it stays on all day. And actually, this is something that Roger Ailes had said publicly and talked about it in meetings and when I worked there, was like it's hard to tell at nighttime when people would go to bed, they would fall asleep with Fox News on. And they couldn't measure like overnight because they weren't sure like when they woke up the next morning, like, oh, they flipped it back on or who was awake. So they just would like leave it on and then fall asleep with it on.
Right.
So my grandmother had Fox News on the TV from the moment she woke up until the moment she went to bed. When you were at her house, Fox was just on and you had conversations with Fox in the background. But one thing I wanted to say also is like, one thing that I really appreciate about Tucker is he's like us. He's willing to call out both sides. He doesn't have any game, like anything in the fight. Like he is just for the people. So he'll call out both sides. And I always appreciated that. I didn't agree with everything, but like, I'm never going to find somebody I 100% agree with. But we can't like just throw him out because he got one thing that might be a big issue to you that he's different on.
Yeah. Well, Clayton and I both worked in TV news. I was at NBC and Clayton was at Fox. And that was our experience, that you can build something different on your own with a more engaged audience. And for all of the people that are here right now, we had a guest recently, Nick Bhatia, who said, you have the smartest audience. They're super engaged in the content. And I said, yes, we do. I was super proud of that and excited to be a part of this community where like really smart people are watching and interested and sharing. And, you don't get that at Fox News because it's a one-way conversation. So I'm sure he will be fine. What we're mourning is yes, this one contingency of people who will no longer hear this anti-corruption message, but then also because Fox News is put on YouTube and Twitter, they can say things that we cannot. They are not beholden to the same censorship rules that we are as an independent channel. So a lot of that will disappear from new media as well. And there are plenty of times where I was like, we can't show this. But when Tucker does, I'm like, well, at least it's out there, right?
Yeah, like he's opened the door for it, and you hope, and that's the thing, because Fox News, there's these major networks that are sort of given passage on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right. So if Tucker does a segment, he's a Fox News host. It's on the Fox News YouTube channel. He does a segment. Whoa. But if Tim Pool did it or Redacted does it, like you run the risk of it being pulled down or taken down. Right.
Yes.
So Tucker goes and does a whole segment on the Bud Light story. But then all these other YouTubers do it too, and they all get taken down and banned, and his segment still lives on.
Right.
So
then that becomes a loss for all of us because of the current rules.
And like to put a light on that, like we've had videos that end up being flagged as 18 plus. So like you have to be 18 and logged into YouTube, which they get terrible views because most people don't watch it that way. and all we showed was like protesters getting arrested. And if you show something as simple as protesters getting arrested, YouTube is like, nope, that's violent police action. You can't monetize it, and it's 18 plus. But then like you can have that same exact clip on a major news network's YouTube channel, and it's totally fine. You don't have to log in. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's that double standard, and we know that that's the case for us here as independent media versus the big boys that have all of the corporate money and all the billionaires. So it's going to be really interesting to see. You know, I'm going to invite Tucker back on the show. Maybe we can have a frank discussion about it. I'm sure he'll have, if he parted ways amicably, they've probably signed some sort of NDA or something where, you know, okay, we're going to leave part amicably. There's not going to be any like disparagement back and forth, and he's going to talk about what he can do in the future here. So anyway, I'll invite him back on the show. But our thoughts are with Tucker and his family, which I'm sure has just been inundated with craziness today. And they've got a wedding coming up in the family. So take some time, you know, and just like get out of the furnace for a little while, you know, and anyway, thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.